When it comes to fantasy football, the Buffalo Bills have one bona fide fantasy stud for Dynasty and Redraft, but then quite a few question marks across the rest of the roster. So join as Ed and I help to navigate the Bills' impact for our Redraft fantasy football leagues on our Bills Deep Dive show. We'll start with a player we've referenced at the beginning, though, Ed. It can't be argued anything other than Josh Allen just keeps being an absolute fantasy asset year on year on year, as well as the MVP last season for the whole NFL.
Yeah, I mean, injury permitting, and he's proved incredibly durable over his NFL career. Josh Allen is about as close to a nailed-on pick as you're going to get. He's been QB1 or QB2 for fantasy for 5 years on the trot, and it only really looks like Lamar who's going to challenge him for the number one slot again. There was a slight drop-off in passing volume last year, but he racked up 12 rushing touchdowns. And he also cut out the interceptions with one of his best ever seasons, only 6 across the whole season. It all comes down really to whether you want to take a quarterback in the first couple of rounds. I mean, if you take him, he won't let you down. It's as simple as that. He is someone who is so nailed on to get you big scores every week that, depending on what strategy you're running in your redraft leagues, he's going to be a good pickup.
Yeah, I mean, I've got him down as QB2 because I could not type QB1 when I've got to also choose a number for Lamar Jackson. But look, last year, I think the thing that really got him over the line is consolidating his fantasy value across the whole season when he won people games when it really mattered, but also his MVP campaign as well. Week 14, 51.88 points against the Rams, and follow that with 41.28 points against the Lions. So when it got to the business end of fantasy season, he really kicked up, didn't he? Week 16, 12.16. That annoyed lots of people, but you take that when you've just had 2 absolute mega weeks. It's just how it happens.
That average.
You're right, though. Yeah, the only conversation is whether you want to take a quarterback in late round 2, early round 3. And for me, unless it's just a league where I think let's try something different, the answer is usually no. So I'll never end up with Josh Allen. I'll never end up with Lamar Jackson in my redraft leagues.
And I think what the difference over the last few couple of years is that Allen and Lamar are in a league of their own, aren't they? I think previously you might have had Mahomes up there as well. But I really do think Josh Allen and Lamar are the only quarterbacks you should be considering taking early on. I'm not buying into Jaden Daniels just yet, but yeah, those two have proved so consistently incredible at the position that they are someone you can take early.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts was probably in that conversation up until last year as well. People thinking, is this going to be the year he takes a real leap? You're right. Jaden Daniels, we might be talking about in that tier this time next year, but it's not the risk I want to take at the moment. Could well pay off if people do, though. Yeah, Josh Allen is a clear and obvious. We could go on for ages to talk about all the different stats that you can knock up for fantasy. You pick him, you're going to do very well at quarterback. It's just much that's how you want to build your team. The question marks do come in, though, when we get to running back, not only around fantasy value, but will he be in Buffalo the way he continue? I mean, it's off-season. So obviously, people have got to delete teams from their profiles. They've got to put the house up for sale. It's how we get contracts. Do you think James Cook will get that contract and still be in Buffalo in starting week 1?
Yes, I mean, that is the thing. He will be seeking a contract extension this season. So the big question is, do the Bills invest in him? He will be expensive if they want to invest in him. And so if they do, he will continue to have a heavy workload. He managed just 2 rushing touchdowns in 2023, but that rocketed to 16 last season. Yet, as we discussed in one of our off-season shows, there's going to be a regression there. That 16 is going to be a massive outlier. It's just how much that drops by. I mean, he was RB8 last year, and he's going off the board. He's dropped slightly from that RB12 when I last looked. It was down to about RB14 as ADP. If he stays, he's going to be number 1 running back in Buffalo. But you've got to remember that Josh Allen will eat into some of his rushing work. It doesn't mean that Cook won't still be busy. You know, Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson still have huge seasons alongside each other. But until that contract situation is resolved, I just don't know how big his workload is going to be. We just maybe have to wait and see how that unfolds.
And it's the 16 touchdowns that are the worry for me, because touchdowns aren't a consistent stat season on season on season on season. He had 2 for his first 2 seasons, followed by 16. Probability would indicate that will drop, as you've already said. RB, where he's going at the minute, so I think it's probably fair value, isn't it? It's just, is he going to be suiting up week 1? If he goes elsewhere and you're drafting him this early in the off season, so we're recording early July, potentially later in the season, that could reflect decent value if the contract's signed, is at training camp and all is calm, all is quiet, isn't it?
Yeah, I think depending on where he ends up, you'd expect him to go. If someone does trade for him, they're going to have to invest in him, and you'd expect for them to trade for him as their RB1 with possible upside there. So I think wherever he ends up, he should get the workload, but I don't know. He's probably somebody that's going a bit too high for me, so I'm not getting many shares in him just because I'm a bit unsure about his situation.
He scored on 7.7% of his rush attempts, which that's just a mega stat, isn't it? Like, you think that he's scoring that frequently, surely that isn't sustainable. But we've said this of lots of other players where we're questioning whether they're going to be able to do the same again season on season. The depth chart behind him isn't particularly intimidating, is it?
No, I mean, there's a couple of running backs behind him who'll get work. You've got Ty Johnson, and he's coming into his 8th season in the NFL, and his 7th season was his most productive. But that was mainly because he was involved in the receiving game. 3 of his 4 touchdowns were receptions. He'll get reps, but probably not going to be fantasy relevant. And Ray Davis, most of a bit of a workhorse in his rookie season, making a lot of hard yards in the trenches. He will have some fantasy relevant weeks, but it'll be difficult to predict when. So I'm not really having either of them as making a fantasy impact this year.
No, and Ray Davis, he only was on the field for 33% of snaps on average last season, so he didn't earn that confidence last year initially. And also an interesting stat around his actual production with the ball. Amongst all running backs with 75 plus carries, he ranks 39th in yards per carry, only 3.91. Now, yards per carry is a stat that lots of people are in or out on how valuable it is, but I'd rather see that number. If it's not north of 4, I start to worry a little bit.
Yeah, indeed. I remember Mixon at the Bengals having a particularly poor season where he was low 3s, wasn't it? And that was painful to watch. So, yeah, I do think it is a concern.
Whilst you're here, just take a moment to pause us. Make sure you give us a subscribe, a like, and see if you can share this video as well. And why not get involved in the comments down below also. And whilst you're here, go and have a check out of all of the other deep dive shows. We are working our way through all 32 teams this off season. So go and check out either your other favorites or your other fancy relevant teams where you're trying to make some tough decisions for your redraft leagues. Speaking of tough decisions, it's quite tough to decide whether you should invest at wide receiver in fantasy when it comes to the Bills, isn't it?
Yeah, with such an elite quarterback who is, of course, a phenomenal rusher, but also an incredible passer, that there's not really been since Diggs, they've not really had an elite wide receiver. I mean, we're going to have a look at a couple now, but when it comes to fantasy, I'm not really sure they're going to win you any leagues. But first of all, let's have a look at Khalil Shakir, who is wide receiver. Well, he was wide receiver 37 last year, and he's going off the board about wide receiver 38 this year. So people expect him to have a very similar finish. He's shown progression year on year, culminating in a more than solid season last year. He's not really a deep threat, but he's a very reliable target for Josh Allen. He managed 597 yards after the catch last year, which ranked third amongst wide receivers. So that's, a hugely positive stat. He had 10 weeks as a wide receiver 2 or better last season. So he was a very solid flex option. And he's probably going to be the guaranteed slot receiver for the team. And I expect him to be heavily involved, maybe emerging as wide receiver 1 in that run-heavy offense. I think he's probably reached his ceiling, to be honest, in the Bills' offense. It's not really been a pass-happy attack under Joe Brady, and I don't really see that changing in 2025. So, as you put up on the screen, wide receiver 3, flex potential for Shakir, but not really much more than that.
And we said a few times last season as well that Josh Allen just put the ball where he needed to put the ball to win the game. He wasn't funneling the ball in any certain direction. I expect the same this season as well. And there's a number of options at wide receiver that potentially all of them could end up having their odd kind of flash here and there. The Bills getting it done, but no one individual getting it done week in, week out.
Yeah, I think Shakir, he's coming off the board around, in the 7th round, and he's a good pickup in round 7. He won't let you down. And if he's there, he's probably someone that I'll look to pick up because I feel like I can trust him to deliver regular points for me.
Someone that we were hoping we would be able to trust last year, who came in with a lot of hype, we'll be hoping to press on, and that's Keon Coleman.
Yes, he was 33rd pick last year in the draft, and I'm sure both he and the Bills would have hoped for better. Ended up, as you can see, as wide receiver 71. He ended up being used as the deep threat, so he averaged nearly 20 yards per reception across the season. There just weren't very many receptions. You've got to credit him. He emerged ahead of Amari Cooper, who got moved on, but he's still going to have some competition, as we'll see in 2025. I just think Keon Coleman's going to struggle for reps. And I kind of be wary of even wasting a bench pick on him. Yes, he would be depth on the bench, but the Bills' offense is just not designed for big wide receiver numbers. He might have a few big weeks, but as with a lot of depth pieces, you just don't really know when they're going to be.
No, and I think he will be on people's benches. They're hoping he kicks on, hoping he's a good depth piece, but he's not a player I think I'm going to actively be targeting whatsoever for those exact reasons as well. Do you want to have a look at who is then further behind on the depth chart of the Bills? Well, we're not getting much more fancy relevant, but it's worth talking about them because they're there for completeness.
There are a few other wide receivers knocking about in Buffalo. You've got Curtis Samuel. Difficult to see him getting much game time, looking like the best he can hope for is to be wide receiver 4 again. Josh Palmer, Mr. Underwhelming, moves from LA to Buffalo. He might have been brought in to replace Coleman as the deep threat, possibly. That's what the talk is. So that might lead to Coleman having more of a varied role. But Josh Palmer, a 3-year deal for $29 million. Admittedly, not much of it is guaranteed. That suggests he's got to have something to do, but he's well to get that, hasn't he, Josh Palmer? Let's be honest.
His agent's earned his bonus there, hasn't he?
100%. And final one, Laviska Shenault Jr. Interesting move for him, but I can't see him really doing much more than replicate his special teams work of previous seasons. I don't think he is going to be fancy relevant. Out of the 3, if you pushed me, Palmer might have a few weeks. Samuel might have a couple of weeks, but I wouldn't be investing in any of them.
No, I agree on that. So we won't labour the point. We shall move on to more uncertainty, though, I guess, when we get to tight end.
Yeah, it was a really surprising regression for Dalton Kincaid in his sophomore season. He was tight end 11 in his rookie season, very solid numbers. But then he dropped off significantly to end up as tight end 30 last year. Yes, knee injuries were a problem, but he struggled to block, and he had just a 58.7% catch rate last year. That is pretty bad. Even George Pickens would be upset by that. He's clearly got talent as Kincaid, but last year was a worry after a good end to his rookie season. He had a 29% target rate last year, so that was positive, suggesting they've got that faith in him, but he's got to start making serious steps forward this year. I think with Dalton Kincaid, he's either going to be a bit of a sleeper pick because he's going at tight end 13, which slightly overvalues him, or he could be a massive bust. I can't decide at the moment. I mean, anything's possible when you're playing alongside Josh Allen in that offense, but he might be someone to pick up later in the season. If you're streaming tight ends, he might be a decent option. But yeah, that sophomore regression does worry me.
And when we're thinking about tight ends, that it's so shallow when it comes to fantasy asset players that only 3 appearances in the top 12 finishes last season really isn't good enough on any level, is it? Because that means when you're outside top 12, you are getting probably below 6 points to be pulling out of that several weeks. I think we all expected that we'd see him really come into his own with Diggs going. He could really be the target that Josh Allen leant towards that. But as I said, he didn't lean towards anyone in particular. Dalton Kincaid had that knee injury as well. Will we see him come out of that a bit stronger this season? Once again, there's just too many question marks, and there are comfortably many players I would rather take ahead of him. We spoke about not necessarily wanting to go too early on quarterback. Tight end this year, I don't think you need to go that early to get a fairly reliable player. You can probably wait till the middle of the pack and then not have to worry about considering players like Kincaid and whether you want to draft them.
That's right. In that kind of 10 to 20 bracket tight ends, which is where he sits, there are so many decent options that I'm not really trusting Kincaid from that point of view.
So I am certainly hoping that this is not another big year for the Bills. I'm sure you are as well, Ed, as we look for the Ravens and Bengals to assert their dominance in the AFC. But what do you think the Bills' outlook for their season is as we head into 2025?
You know, they'll be there or thereabouts, won't they, again? They're desperate to get that monkey off their back. They're brilliantly coached, great on offense and defense. So, I expect them probably to have another deep playoff run. I don't see how that isn't the case. But yeah, the time is ticking, isn't it, with this current crop? And they need to make the most of the opportunities they've got in the next couple of years.
That's another team down then in our 32-team fantasy deep dive. So please, after you finish this video, give us a subscribe, a like, and a share. And then why not go and check out one of the other teams? But for now, it's goodbye from me. It's goodbye from Ed. And as always, Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to Pestle and Ed of TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Instagram and Twitter.